And do you think the Tamil National Alliance or the Northern Provincial Council, where it has a stronghold, is feeling torn between what India wants and what the Sri Lankan government wants? Do you think it's still trying to find its footing in the middle of these two forces?
No. Actually, I would have been happy. I mean, I wouldn't have been very happy, but I would have been happy if it were limited to that. No. There's something else going on here, Mahina. Tamil Nadu is trying to dictate to the government of India and the rest of India. And so far it looks like it is succeeding. The Tamil diaspora is also trying to intervene and dictate to the government of India and even manipulate Tamil Nadu. I say this not as a propaganda device, because I'm not in that business, but because of a very strange thing that has happened. The TGTE, the so-called Transnational Government of Tamil, has sent a petition to the Indian Ministry of External Affairs stating that India should boycott the Chogan. Now, the Indian Ministry of External Affairs has not responded. What has happened after that is what is crucial. The TGT has moved the high courts of Tamil Nadu. They are represented by lawyers in Tamil Nadu who have taken this up in the Tamil Nadu courts. And the Tamil Nadu courts are surprised. They're saying, are we supposed to, is the Indian Ministry of External Affairs supposed to respond to private petitions from overseas? But they haven't thrown out the case. The case is being deliberated upon. So the TGT is petitioning the Indian Ministry of External Affairs and challenging its inaction by a court action in Tamil Nadu. This is a global dynamic, and the TNA is not caught or doesn't feel itself caught between Delhi and Colombo. If so, frankly, I think that that would be comparatively healthy because it's between two governments. But I think the TNA is caught between being part of Sri Lanka, part of the Indo-Lanka Accord, but in a new equation, one of dignity and reform, or being, and that's on the one hand, and on the other hand, being part of a pan-Tamil dynamic that is now unfolding, where there's a greater assertiveness. There's even an attempt to shape the foreign policy of India. Pan-Tamil nationalism feels obviously that this is a moment that they have the two major parties, Congress and the BJP, by the throat. And that it is now on a rising curve. It is dictating to Canada. Stephen Harper has gone along. It's putting pressure on Britain, and it has even challenged the British. There was a demonstration in Tamil Nadu outside the British mission challenging David Cameron's decision to come to Colombo. So this is a global phenomenon. I think the TNA, part of the time, feels sucked in
inevitably
to that. Not inevitably. Not inevitably. I think that they could be far more pragmatic, but they're not. That's why they say one thing one day and another thing the next. And that is why you find even very moderate people like Mr. Sumandran suddenly saying something like, well, Stephen Harper is right to boycott Chogan. And we hope that the Indians do the same, which is not a very moderate statement to make. It's a statement, it's a kind of attitude that can actually block progress towards devolution. It is one thing to use the external pressure to secure devolution. It's another to identify yourself and cheer on a boycott of your own country.
Yeah.
So the question is an existential one. Is the TNA Sri Lankan only conditionally? I mean, is it the case that if you give us this, then we will consider ourselves Sri Lankan, but if not, not? Or is the TNA saying, look, we are Sri Lankan, we just don't like the deal we are getting within Sri Lanka, and we are going to fight to improve that? Now, there was no question on the part of the American civil rights movement, Martin Luther King, that he was American, but he was criticizing the domestic and foreign policy of the United States of America. He wanted a different America. His dream was within America, but a different America. Now, the TNA is schizoid about their identity. I mean, you can't really ask someone else to accommodate your identity when you're not sure what your identity is yourself. And that is the dilemma of the TNA, and I might say the dilemma of Tamil nationalism in Sri Lanka.
And how do you think the government in Sri Lanka is viewing this sort of drama, I would say, taking place within the TNA?
Well, the government of Sri Lanka, I think, is viewing it in a very backward or rudimentary way. It has not gamed this through. This is a global game, and the dynamics are global. It's very simple. You can see it. It's nothing opaque. It's very transparent. Whether it is Canada or the British Parliament and the Labour Party calling for a boycott of CHOGM, the Malaysian opposition calling for a boycott. It's a global challenge. Maina, in 2009, on the 19th of May, the Sri Lankan Armed Forces, representing a preponderance of the citizens of Sri Lanka, basically the Sinhalese, encircled and overwhelmed the Tigers. And I'm very happy that we did. Whatever I could do for that cause, I did. But the government and some of the Sinhalese didn't see the wider frame. It's that while the Sinhalese and the army had encircled and overwhelmed the Tigers, globally there was an assemblage of forces, some Western countries, the Tamil diaspora and so on, which were trying to encircle Sri Lanka, just as Sri Lanka had encircled the Tigers. There was a wider encirclement taking place in the global arena. Now, Sri Lanka was able to defeat that in late May 2009 in Geneva, this we know. And in a way, the holding of the Commonwealth Summit is also a partial victory for Sri Lanka. Partial victory, but a victory nonetheless. But this global encirclement is now tightening. The politics of India towards Sri Lanka, I mean, India is a very important country. The politics of Great Britain, the politics of Canada, these are not small places, is now being, in a way, almost remote controlled by the Pan-Tamil nationalist movement and sentiment. And the government of Sri Lanka is in no way geared to combat this. The response has simply been what I call smug truculence. That is, we're very smug about the way we are and who we are and what we've done. And for the rest of the time, we growl, frown, or bark. Vigneswaran, look at this, he wants this and that. Nah, we're not going to give it to him. Let him go fly a kite. The point is, if Vigneswaran flies a kite, he'll be flying it on the Madras Marina.
So we'll be basically, if the government shows that sort of hostility towards the Northern Provincial Council, are you saying that the Northern Provincial Council will be pushing itself more towards India's lap?
Not India's lap. It's not India's lap. That's what Sri Lanka sees. There's us and there's India. No. Even India is now being maneuvered, manipulated, neutralized by those who want, what happened with Bangladesh. They want India to come in on the side of the Tamil separatist project, on the side of the anti-Sri Lankan campaign, or at the very least for India to back off so that they can use their demographic global preponderance and influence to achieve the goals that they have stated so clearly of the isolation of Sri Lanka and the breaking away of the North. Now, Professor Samuel Huntington, in his famous The Clash of Civilizations, mentions Sri Lanka. It's mentioned as an example of what he called a fault line war. He says in South Asia, and I might add, as in the Middle East, civilizational boundaries overflow political nation-state boundaries. And in the case of Sri Lanka, he says you have the Hindu civilization, which has a residue or a beachhead in the north of the island, and then you have the Buddhist civilization, which once prevailed under Asoka in India but was pushed back in the rest of the island. And there you have a fault line, which means this is where it can break. Now, it is not inevitable that that happens, because if you take neighboring India, Pakistan broke away, set itself up as a state for the Muslims, but we do know that there's a huge number of Muslims in India. Now, the Muslims in India don't feel that they want to join Pakistan or that they want a separate state. Why? Why? The reason is that India did not react by declaring itself a Hindu state. It is a secular state. Because it is a secular state, the Muslims in India can identify with India and not necessarily with Pakistan. Now, Sri Lanka, unfortunately, is rather different. And when the state increasingly represents not the totality of the population of the island, but the cultural heartland, the majority, then those who do not belong to that majority
will feel isolated,
whether religious or linguistic or both, as in the case of the Tamils, will feel less of a loyalty, less of an attraction to be part of the whole, and they would be more susceptible to the tug, to the magnetism, to the attraction from across a narrow stretch of water in Tamil Nadu, where there is obviously a very strong anti-Sri Lankan sentiment, which all the political parties have felt sufficiently afraid of to sign up to in a unanimous resolution. I mean, that's a very extreme resolution, and everybody signed up to it. And we are on the doorstep of that. Now, Sri Lanka has to face this challenge, and it cannot face it with the same mentality as during the hot war, because this is far more complex.